Back in 2015, I attended high school at an age where I was younger than most students. The reason for this was because I had skipped about 2 grades due to my parents thinking I wasn't being challenged enough. To put it in basic terms, I was a smart kid and had the gift of being intelligent in my studies. Anyway, this happened the week before spring break, and I remember being in my biology class. Our teacher was going over some stuff about the examination of frogs, which sort of entertained us. As we're about halfway through the lecture, our principal, Mr. Hernandez, got on the loudspeaker and told the school we were going on lockdown. All teachers and faculty were required to lock their doors and get their students to the safest place of the room. My teacher had ordered us to move to the back of the class since we didn't have a closet. He locks the door, turns off the lights, and we wait until the all clear. I'd say we sat in total silence for a good few minutes before we hear the sound of the main doors opening from the hall. My thought was that it could have been police, but something told me it was anything but that. Not even a minute later, we begin to hear these deranged screams coming from down the hallway. To be honest, I wasn't sure if it was a man or a woman's voice, but whoever it was sounded like an actual lunatic. The whole class began to look at each other with terror written on their faces. One of the girls' phones in my class had gone off, and that caused everyone to become even more worried. As the screaming got closer, I came to the realization that it was a man with this extremely deep voice. What he was saying still chills me to the bone. He was going door to door while banging on them, saying what he'll do when he gets in. The stuff he's saying is horrendous to the point where the majority of us are texting our parents and calling 911. He did this to every door until he eventually came to ours, going to town on it very hard. Thankfully, this was one of the few schools that had bulletproof doors, so I knew the chances of him getting in were slim. Even though the doors were stable, he still gave it a good beating. The sounds of those bangs and screams will forever be burned into the back of my head. Suddenly, he straight up punches through the small glass window while trying to reach the lock from the inside. At this point, everyone is terrified to the point where my teacher had to force his arm out of the window. This thankfully seemed to work, as he then continued down the hall with those horrid screams toward the main office. However, he didn't make it far, as police did end up entering the building and restraining him with ease. After about an hour, our principal gave the all clear and had ended school early that day. The school faculty had to personally escort students safely out of the building as we didn't know who else was around. It wasn't until a week later where I learned a shocking truth as to what led up to this. The story behind why and how we got into the school will forever haunt me. As it turns out, he was being transported to a facility when he managed to rip off the frame that separates him and the driver. He knocked the driver out cold and put the vehicle to a stop right near the school where he got out and entered the building. He was insanely strong and had been off his meds for days. The driver who was transporting him was fortunately okay and was given proper treatment. Thankfully, nobody was hurt when he entered the school. After that, many parents were outside picking up their kids in a panic. My parents had gone to the school and picked me up as well, and even pulled me out for a few days. As far as I'm concerned, he was likely taken back to a mental facility and is being held there. For the next few weeks, the school had begun doing lockdown drills as a precaution. Nothing has happened since, but I just hope he's getting the proper help he needs. This story is told in the perspective of a female. This took place in the spring of 2016 in my freshman year of high school when I was around 14 or so. Around this time was the peak of the whole infamous clown sighting epidemic that spread around like wildfire. These events blew up on social media that got the attention of everyone. If you were a teen or in school around that time, you definitely know what I'm talking about. Long story short, it was the next big thing that just never went away. In my mind, I had thought that it wasn't as serious as some people thought, but little did I know, I was beyond wrong. To be exact, this happened on March 25th of 2016, where I was in my last period of the day. If I remember, I was in history class and we had just finished up an assignment on the Titanic and the history of it. At one point, I asked my teacher if I could use the restroom for a minute since I had completed the project early. Being the sweet and charming teacher she was, she said yes and gave me the pass. The restroom near my class was being cleaned, so I had to use the one on the other side of the building. As I'm making my way over to the other hallway, I look down the hall and see, out of all things, a person dressed in a clown costume. My initial thought was that it was probably just someone doing a prank because of the trend. I must say, the costume appeared very realistic in detail, even if it was a joke. Needless to say, however, it creeped me the hell out. I give a quick nod to the clown as I entered the girls' restroom, not thinking too much of it. As I'm doing my business, I hear the PA turn on in the hall and inform everyone that we were on lockdown. My heart sank into the pit of my stomach as I heard this, and knew right then that it had to be because of the clown. That being said, I pull up my pants and, as I look up, I see the clown's head peeking in above the stall. I let out what was probably the loudest scream I've ever done as I pushed open the door. The person in the clown costume obviously fell to the ground as I ran out of the bathroom. I ran straight to my teacher's room, practically begging for her to unlock the door so I could get in. However, I knew she couldn't, as there was also a chance whoever that was would get in too. She told me from the other side of the door that I had to run and hide somewhere safe. I ended up running out of the hall and ran inside some electrical room that happened to be unlocked. The sound of a machine humming could be heard, so I figured that it would make it seem less likely that I was here. Suddenly, I then hear several sets of footsteps enter the building yelling police. I look through the vent on the door and see about 10 or so officers and a few SWAT guards surrounding the area. I felt safe, but I didn't want to come out with the possibility of startling them. 10 minutes go by, and I see them walk out of the building with 2 clowns in handcuffs, one of them being the one I saw. The other one had this sort of samurai machete thing that was in fact real. Turns out, these 2 clowns actually went to my school, but had gotten suspended for their behavior. They then went on to say that it was just for the trend, and that they didn't intend to actually harm anyone. However, police weren't buying it and arrested them no matter what the intentions were. After that, I eventually came out of the room and walked over to them to explain what had happened. They brought me into the main office, where I was with a faculty member until my parents arrived. As far as I know, those 2 boys were expelled from school and had served months in jail as they were 18. My parents ended up moving me to another school after that, and ever since then, I've always developed a fear of clowns. It took nearly half a year for the whole clown trend to die down. To be honest, I had never really understood the hype around it. Even with that whole situation, I still heard of many reports of people encountering clowns and almost getting hurt. Thankfully, nothing like that has ever happened again. When I was in my mid-20s, I got a job as a janitor at a local high school to make some extra cash for a car I wanted. It wasn't the best job, but it was good enough to support myself financially, as well as helping my parents with bills. My duties basically consisted of the usual tasks you would think a janitor does: mopping, sweeping, cleaning windows, etc. I worked only 4 days a week, which was a decent schedule and a chill job. Most of these days I'd end up working the night shift, but one day I had been called in for a day shift. The reason for this was because of some stupid prank that a few seniors had done for the end of the year. Every year, all of the seniors would throw what's called a senior prank, which was amusing to them, but definitely not the janitors. Long story short, it was a food fight, so me and another janitor, Todd, had to clean up the whole thing. Fortunately, this was around the time when all students had been in 5th period, so it was relatively quiet. It was just me and Todd that had the whole cafeteria to ourselves. Anyway, as I'm picking up the trash, the PA comes on and it's the principal of the school. She sounds terrified and out of breath for whatever reason and went on to say that this was a code red. My fellow janitor and I had been instructed to hide in the closet and to not leave until the all clear. We go inside the closet and I'm texting my mom that the school is locked down and that I didn't know what was going on. Minutes felt like hours waiting in the closet for something to happen. Suddenly, the main doors to the cafeteria open with full force. Looking up at the ceiling was a tall, pale woman just standing there making these strange noises. In her hand, a knife. She begins to walk around the cafeteria while yelling out these deranged phrases. Everything from come out wherever you are to I'll kill all of you. It was pretty obvious that this woman was clearly mentally ill with possibly in possession of drugs. All of a sudden, my phone starts to ring like crazy, and I see that it's my mom who thankfully got my attention. It also got the attention from the woman staring in the direction of the closet. Suddenly, I can start to see her slowly making her way toward the closet with the knife in hand. All the while, she's kind of just crouching while slowly walking as if she were trying to be stealthy. In that moment, I wasn't sure what I was going to do to protect myself. My initial thought was to somehow fight back, but we're in a small janitorial closet with little room. On top of that, I had no idea what she was capable of, especially when she had a knife. Seconds felt like hours as she made her way over to the closet door where I just prayed for the best. I shit you not, I actually felt like these were my last moments. She was gonna come in here and kill us, I just knew it. Just as I was about to hopefully tackle this woman, I hear loud yelling coming from the main doors. Thankfully, police opened the doors with their guns drawn, telling her to get down and for Todd and I to come out slowly. After multiple attempts of her trying to resist arrest, the cops tased her, and it was then where she was put in cuffs. As it turns out, this woman had come into school through the main entrance and had assaulted both the principal and the woman working at the front desk. After all, this was in the mid-2000s, so the school couldn't afford to install proper security equipment, so we were essentially sitting ducks. While the school didn't have any security equipment, they apparently managed to get some grants to afford better security staff. While this was certainly an unfortunate situation, there's still one fact that always terrifies me. The only reason police were so quick to arrive was because there just so happened to be only one patrol car in the area. Keep in mind, the school was relatively far out in the suburbs and there wasn't a police station for a few miles. It just makes you wonder what would have happened had police arrived a minute later. I'm thankful no one was hurt, and I'm not sure as to how that woman is doing today. but this was sure as hell one of the scariest situations I've ever been in. After that incident, I quit my janitor job and went back to school to pursue my degree in tech. Fast forward 15 years later, and I now work for a great design company where I was thankfully able to make a good living off it. However, there are times when this incident still comes back into mind while I sleep. I still sometimes tell my story to others, but I most of the time just keep it to myself.